Welcome to Enjoy Exceptional Living. I am Lynn Fritz, your program producer and host. This program is in collaboration with Enjoy Magazine, KLXR 1230 AM radio, and myself, a private practice licensed marriage and family therapist. In each of our programs, we have conversations with individuals that are involved in projects and programs, nonprofit organizations, private businesses. Sometimes it's an association or group of people. But our intention is to bring to our listeners the best of people, places, and projects of Northern California that we think are exceptional and that we think you will enjoy. I know that some of us have had the opportunity in the past as we drive east from Redding. There's a beautiful place called Hat Creek, and there's a unique opportunity when you're in Hat Creek, an extraordinary sort of, some people think it is a sci-fi. There is the Hat Creek Radio Observatory, and we're here in conversation with John Richards. He is the senior software engineer and is an employee of the SETI Institute, which is a nonprofit organization. So I want to welcome you to the program, John.
Hello.
Hello there. It's good to have you here because I've been so curious for many, many years. And first of all, for people that are not familiar with the Hat Creek Radio Observatory, what is that? What's it do?
Okay, so it's a site that currently has 42 big dishes, like satellite receiving dishes, and each one of the dishes is 20 feet in diameter, so they're quite large. So each one of these 42 dishes can point around in the sky, receiving radio signals. So that's what we currently have, but this site's been in operation since the early 60s, I believe, and it's gone through a lot of incarnations, not even related to the SETI Institute, who I work for. I'll tell you about that later. There's been a lot of scientists, it's been a lot of people from UC Berkeley in the radio astronomy department have done a lot of work there over the years. Currently, they're not involved anymore in the site, but they're the ones that have the large history with the site. Since 2011, UC Berkeley has left the site, and it's basically been the SETI Institute in cooperation with another institute called SRI, which they're a large corporation in the Bay Area, and they're using it to do radio astronomy and experiments.
So do you know what type of experiments?
It's usually related to tracking satellites and that kind of thing. So what our site's really good for is looking for signals in the sky and really pinpointing where those signals are coming from. And it happens to be that a big field is of needing to track things in the skies with satellites, and there's becoming more and more satellites up there. So there's hopefully going to be business for this company SRI to do various things with the satellite tracking and communications, etc.
Because that way it keeps you guys alive.
Right, keeps us alive.
Yeah.
So the SETI Institute, so let me back up.
Yes.
The SETI Institute is an organization that was founded in 1983. So, it's getting up there in age.
Yes.
They're located in Mountain View, California, which is there right by Google, pretty close to the big Google buildings, that whole area. We have approximately 100 people working at the SETI Institute. And the SETI, just to back up, SETI is an acronym that's becoming quite popular now. It stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So we are the SETI Institute, one of the first foundations to actually have the SETI in the name, so we kind of have that as our namesake. And as I said, there's approximately 100 people working there. Most of these people have their PhDs, and they are doing studies in a field called astrobiology. So astrobiology is I like to think of it as the science of what is life, how can we search for life. For instance, they're sending all these probes to Mars and to Jupiter now and Saturn. They're going to be looking on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and they're looking on Mars. They're looking for life, any signs of life. Well, when you say life, what do you mean by life?
Yeah.
So, there's no consensus exactly what is life. And so when they send up all these probes, what are they looking for? Well, this is the kind of science that backs up what to look for if we're looking for life in the universe. Not necessarily intelligent life, but any life in general.
Right.
So that's the main thrust of the SETI Institute, is this astrobiology. I'm part of a very small section of the SETI Institute, which only is approximately 5 people at the moment. And we operate the Allen Telescope Array, which is which is what we call the 42 dishes at the Hat Creek Radio Observatory. So the site is called the Hat Creek Radio Observatory, but on it is this instrument called the Allen Telescope Array, which is the 42 dishes I told you about.
Fascinating.
It's called the Allen Telescope Array because it was the funding for it, which I believe was $28 million in 1999, I believe it started. Paul Allen, he's one of the founders of Microsoft. He's a multi-billionaire.
That's who it's named after?
Yes. So it's
see.
Paul Allen. So it's the Allen Telescope Array. So you're gonna hear me reference the ATA. That's what we. So Hat Creek Radio Observatory is called HCRO, and the ATA is the Allen Telescope Array.
Okay.
Right.
Allen Telescope Array.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a couple questions here, just for clarification. So when you're looking for life, you said, there's been, they haven't settled really on what life is, because I would think life could be described as water or plants. I mean, do you have anything specific when they're talking about life that you've honed in on, or?
Well, okay, so I'm dealing with, and I can explain to you about this, but I'm dealing with the radio transmission side of looking for extraterrestrial intelligence. So it's kind of, we're in a different field in the astrobiology.
So they're doing something else.
They're doing something else. But in that respect, although I'm not qualified because I'm not an astrobiologist, so they'll probably zing me for this, but, anything that they find, and, like they find a little microbe, well, yay, Mars has life. So they're not looking for any, I think they're not looking for any, large animals or anything. They're looking for the very smallest thing they can, just as evidence that life exists somewhere else.
Yeah. I was recently at the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, and I know it's the most visited telescope that there is that looks out at, they focused it on the moon. I was very fascinated by the images of the moon, and you could see the craters. You could see a lot more than, unless you were taking something, from that particular scope or from a shuttle that was nearby. I mean, it was fascinating to see, and to be able to walk up there and see it.
Yeah, right.
It was just extraordinary. We waited in line for like 45 minutes to be able to see it, and we were towards the head of the line. So
what do you poke your eye through an eyepiece or what?
Yeah, there's an eyepiece you just look down into, and it's the big scope that goes out of the doorway there. It's a famous scope. I just can't remember it. It's the most visited site in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
Actually, I think it's in the world, because they get millions of people there. It was just an extraordinary
it's close
experience.
to the city also. That's
it's easy access. It's free. It's wonderful. So I want to encourage our listeners too, not only to the Hat Creek Radio Observatory, but especially Griffith. To be able to go to Griffith and take the family. It's a wonderful event. They have paid presentations, but you learn a lot just from walking and going to look at the scope, through the scope. So in your aspect of what you're doing there at Hat Creek Radio Observatory, you're looking for radio frequencies for life other than what we know it.
Well, we're looking for any sign whatsoever that there's any radio transmission coming from a part of the sky that we don't know where that's coming from. So we point to all these stars, and now they know of several thousand planets that exist outside of our solar system, and we use those as our targets. So we've got quite a large catalog, and the kind of what we're looking for is and SETI is the ET, the intelligent,
Yeah.
search for extra intelligence. So we're looking for an intelligent signal, like a civilization that has broadcasted out either ambient radio, like when this gets broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
If it was broadcast in a strong enough transmitter, they'd be able to hear it many, many light years away, right? So
Yes.
that's what we call the ambient radio transmission. Or we're looking for a more advanced civilization that's actually broadcasting out on purpose, high power.
To try to reach out.
Yeah, as a beacon. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. That's the kind of thing we're looking for.
Do we do that? Do we send a
No.
beacon?
No. There's what you have to think about it is well, first of all, there's disagreement
Yeah.
among the scientists and even the non-scientific community is, should we do this?
Right.
So you remember Stephen Hawking,
Yes.
he gave a statement, he's done this several times, where he says, we should not be talking to, on purpose to any ET out there because it could be dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't believe, that could be dangerous. But a lot of people are kind of scared about that. And then, even if we did decide that, yes, we want to broadcast something out there, what would we broadcast? What would they would want to represent something that the whole world agrees on, that kind of represents the whole, everybody. And how are you ever going to come across, how are you going to come across what kind of message? Who would agree on that? And how are you going to make it, just even if you could decide what to actually broadcast, how are you going to make that information encoded so that it can travel a long way but also be understandable and not just be gibberish if it met another civilization?
Mm-hmm.
So that, and then there's another thing is that just doing, there has been in the past some small programs that have just sent out blips, like maybe a minute or 10 minutes of something. But you really have to have a program behind it that's going to last for many hundreds of years, because it's a large universe out there. And if there's a civilization 50 light years away, well, it takes 50 years for that signal to reach them. So even if there was going to be a communication, we wouldn't hear anything back for 100 years.
Yeah.
So it has to be a long-going. So if you just have a program that gets a year's funding or a month's funding, that really does no good. So
Yeah.
it would take somebody with a huge trust fund to actually fund something that would be actually doing any good. If it, and it's kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah.
Anyway, so who knows where to point?
I guess what comes up for me, I'm curious. So perhaps they'd have, if there was a different civilization or intelligence, maybe they would have a different mechanism that allowed them to travel faster than the speed of light.
Yeah, right. Everybody hopes we'll be able to do that someday. But
Yeah.
if that was the case, you'd think we would see that we'd be able to see evidence of them here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, who knows? Maybe we can go faster in light someday. It just hasn't been discovered how to do that.
It's interesting that Stephen Hawking would say, we need to be careful. I mean, the truth is there's a whole spectrum. Could be all good, or some good, or it can be all bad or real bad. I mean, you don't know what it is. So it sounds like he thinks that it's better to be conservative and not risk that we might encounter something bad.
Right.
Did he give any premise to that thinking?
That I think that's exactly it. He's like, we just don't know what's out there, so we just kind of have to pull back and think more about this. So that's all those reasons are why there hasn't been anything broadcasted out there. But I think the main reason is that there's no funding available.
Yeah.
I mean, they were talking many tens of millions of dollars, if not more. Who's going to ante that up?
Yeah. So what's your study? What's your degree in?
My degree is electrical and computer engineering, and I got it way long time ago in Iowa, University of Iowa. And I was brought up in a pretty rural community, and I decided I wanted to go to school for electrical engineering. And very first day, they got us involved in computers. and I didn't know really what a computer was. There was no computers back then.
Yeah.
You didn't have them, right? And so that ended up being my degree, computer and electrical engineering. So I got to learn back in the 1980s when they were actually building the computers, to learn how to build the computers and program from the ground up. And I got a little bit of the electronic side too of it. So I've been involved in my career in a lot of startups, a lot of different things, but it's been gravitating more towards software. And in 2008, I learned about this position at the SETI Institute, and I fit right in. It's some hardware, electronic, building computers, but a lot of it's software. And it's kind of software it takes you decades to get into that mode of how to think about strange, different kind of software and how to program it from scratch. So it fit my expertise and my interests.
I would think it would have helped being a person that essentially, grew up in when they built the technology for computers. I would think there'd be advantage to that. Maybe not, but it seems like it would give you some witnessing, if not some ways of working innovatively. I mean, it's thinking outside the box that we ever came up with computers.
Right.
Because you're going someplace that had never been designed before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, you think how far we've gone the last 30 years with computers, but still, like every month, there's something that I'm doing that I remember I had to do in class in college way back in the early 80s.
Wow. Isn't that fascinating?
So the guts of it isn't changing. It's
expression.
What's around it, how it's expressed. Yeah.
I've heard the comment that the cell phone that we use today, most of us use, the technology is equivalent to what they first sent people out into space.
Right. Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's even
Okay.
more. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a lot more. Yeah. So if you look at the compute capability, it was less than your calculator. You go to Kmart and you buy a cheap calculator. I think that's like the level that they had.
Isn't that amazing that they would go
I know.
out? They're crazy. Did you ever expect to be working at an observatory like this, a radio observatory?
No. What's funny is it just kind of came out of left field. I had actually never heard of the SETI Institute before. Before I saw the job advertised. And the job I had, it's interesting that the job I had was at an engineering firm in Grass Valley, California. So it's kind of rural. And there was about 5 other engineers. I told them, look at this job. They had never heard of the SETI, of the whole thing with SETI. They were not familiar with it. So I applied for it, and luckily I got the job. So I kind of came. Everybody else, it seems, that works there, that's been their lifelong ambition to work in that field. But I just kind of stumbled across it.
Isn't that
thankfully.
fascinating?
Yeah.
How exploring other opportunities brought you to this.
I had seen the movie Contact.
I was going to ask you about that. That's kind of fascinating because when you're talking about listening for signals, that's what came to mind for me.
So that movie's really close to the SETI Institute because Carl Sagan, remember, he wrote the book Contact. And he was friends and working with a lot of the people at the SETI Institute. Of course, he died in the 90s, but in the 80s and early 90s, he was quite involved. And he knew my boss. She's since retired, but she's still working full time at the SETI Institute. Jill Tarter, and she's the woman that is responsible for actually starting the SETI field in earnest. And she started the SETI Institute with several other people in the early 80s. So she was right there. She knew Carl Sagan, and so he wrote the book with her in mind. I don't know if you remember the movie. It was about a little girl whose dad died early, and she grew up a scientist, astronomer and all this. So that was kind of based after her. So Jodie Foster, she...
And that's Jill.
Yeah, that's Jill.
Wow.
Yeah. So
except for the part where she goes through the contact life on the other
But
world.
what's interesting, so I can kind of tell you what we do there.
I would love to hear that.
Okay, so like I say, we're looking for radio signals. So how do we do that? We're looking for a beacon or something coming from the sky. So we have these 42 dishes, and like I say, they're just like the satellite dishes people have in their house, on top of their house, except they're a lot larger, and they're built for a bit different frequency range.
Is that how you don't pick up everything that's on
No,
Earth?
I'll tell you about
Yeah.
that. So,
I was curious.
Yeah. So, we point it to different things in the sky, and I can tell you about later what we actually point at. But we're listening at night for a large frequency spectrum between 1 gigahertz and 10 gigahertz. I know that doesn't mean much, but FM radio is a lot lower than that, and AM's way lower than that, and our hearing is way lower than that. So, in the movies, and what people commonly say is, well, you're listening to signals. You're listening for a signal. Well, no, we're not listening for a signal, because listening would mean we would have to have headphones on.
Right.
And actually listen for these signals. And first of all, the frequency spectrum we were listening in is far above human hearing.
Right.
Right. So it would have to be downshifted, like AM and FM radio is. Basically, it's downshifted into the audio range. The audio range only is approximately 20,000 hertz, and that's the way you measure frequency in the hertz.
Mm-hmm.
But we listen to 100 million hertz at a time. So even if you were to downshift it and listen to the whole thing, it would take you a month to listen to all the frequencies within what we listen to in 5 minutes. When I say listen, when the computer listens.
The computer listens.
So
You don't have headphones on.
No.
Staff doesn't do that.
No, so that there's common techniques that we keep on trying to improve on,
Mm-hmm.
but our computer systems take that data, those signals from those 42 dishes, and digitize them and analyze them in real time for signals. And
Mm-hmm.
and what they're looking for is a tone, basically, which is common in very simple radio transmissions.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking for a tone that, like I say, within the frequency range of 1 gigahertz and 10 gigahertz. And this tone has to not be steady. This tone actually has to be shifting a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would actually shift it down to the kind of signal that we're looking for, if you actually are able to shift it down into our hearing, it would be like, woo, it would be changing in frequency.
Uh-huh.
And the reason is because of this thing called the Doppler effect.
The what?
The Doppler effect.
Doppler. Okay.
Okay, so the Doppler effect's the same effect that if a train is coming at you and it's blowing its whistle, okay, as it's coming towards you, the whistle frequency
Intensifies.
goes up, and then when it goes woo, and then woo when it
Mm-hmm.
leaves you. So it's the same thing, and the reason is because it's coming towards you or away from you. That changes how the frequency actually shifts. So if we're looking at something in the sky and we see a tone, but it's not shifting, we know that that's radio frequency interference. And like you were talking about earlier, there's a lot of different radio frequency interference. For instance, from this radio station, we might see this signal,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd have to try to pick it out and say, no, this radio station, even though we can see the signal, is not changing its position related to us, so its tone is steady.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're actually looking at something, let's say, from a distant planet, and we're seeing a transmission, our Earth is rotating, so we are actually
Yes.
we're actually approaching that planet, or receding from the planet
Right.
continually. So that frequency will
That
shift.
Doppler effect.
Yeah, so that Doppler effect. So we're looking for a signal that has that Doppler effect. We're also looking for a simple signal that just pops out, like not something that's what they call spread spectrum. For instance, if we saw your telephone,
Uh-huh.
your cell phone, you wouldn't see a nice thin signal. You'd see a whole bunch of scattered signals, because that's the way cell phones do it. And FM radio does that. We're looking for a very thin, very precise thing. And so we're looking up at the sky. We don't have the technology yet to actually analyze for every kind of signal, because
Right.
it's just not there. So we're picking out what we can do. Okay, so the science and the thought, that's basically is what we're going to do, is these thin signal frequencies that are shifting a bit in time. there's hope, that in the future, maybe 500 years from now, you'd be able to feed this kind of information into a computer, and it would automatically, artificial intelligence will just pick out the kind of signals you're looking for. But right now, we don't have that available
Capacity,
to us. People often ask, well, why are you picking 1 gigahertz to 10 gigahertz? That's the frequency range.
Mm-hmm.
There's reason for that, and as if you look at from the sky, if you point any type of antenna at the sky, you're going to see and you turn that kind of visually like on a television.
Uh-huh.
On a television, you would tune to it. I don't know if you can do that now, but with the digital, but you tune to a channel that's not broadcast, and there's no station around. You see all that static.
Yes.
Now, that static is actually radio frequency interference, static from what they say the Big Bang. That's
interesting.
So that's the majority of what we get at the Allen Telescope Array.
It's the static.
The static. So weeding through the static.
And, it takes me back to the early years of television when you would see static on the screen.
That's right.
You don't anymore with cable and digital.
We see it all the time, all day long.
Yeah, that's interesting. It also reminds me of the film Poltergeist, where there was static and then there was a signal that came through from a different world.
Right.
So, in our second segment, I want to talk some more about SETI Institute, and I'm curious to find out if, where Jill Tarter today, who contact was kind of Carl Sagan and his relationship with her and her relationship with him, how contact with Jodie Foster came into being. I also want to have you clarify, because we listen, you might say, we might describe your listening, but it's not with the ear. And I want to find out if there's any visual representations of what you're looking for. So we're here in conversation with John Richards. He is the senior software engineer for Hat Creek Radio Observatory. We're talking about what is involved in that and why he's there. And so I'm going to invite you to come back to our second segment. We're going to pick his brain more because he works for the SETI Institute, which is a fascinating listening for extraterrestrial signal from outer space. So come right back to enjoy exceptional living. Welcome back to Enjoy Exceptional Living. I am Lynn Fritz, your program producer and host. This program is in collaboration with Enjoy Magazine, KLXR 1230 AM radio, and myself, a private practice licensed marriage and family therapist. We're here in conversation talking about an extraordinary project, site, business facility in Northern California known as the Hat Creek Radio Observatory. And we have here John Richards. He is the senior software engineer and is employed at that site by the SETI Institute. As he described in our first segment a little about who the SETI Institute is and why he's there working, one of the things that I did not know until our conversation is about how there's another organization, I believe, John, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the SRI Corporation that also uses the site for some of tracking satellites and experiments that they do.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, that the site was operated by UC Berkeley Radio Astronomy Department. So they had financial troubles like all universities have. And if you remember, back in 2010, I guess it got really bad. They had to cut out all fat in their budget, and they left the site. So we didn't have the funds to actually keep the thing going because UC Berkeley was paying the electricity.
Oops.
They hired, they hired the people that were actually maintaining the hardware and the software. And what I mean by that is, these are 42 of these dishes, and they all have to be maintained and greased, and they got electronics in them that break down all the time. It's just like a constant thing.
Yeah.
going back and forth fixing these things. So that all stopped. And luckily we found this corporation. They're a large corporation in Menlo Park. SRI is their name. It used to stand for, I believe, Stanford Research International, but they're one of these companies, they just changed it to SRI.
Huh.
So like IBM used to be International Business Machines.
Yes.
It's no longer that. It's just
It's
IBM.
IBM.
So anyway, SRI came in and they wanted to do radio astronomy and related to satellite tracking, that kind of thing. So they want to learn. They're trying to learn how to work in that field and get contracts to whatever needs to be tracked. That's as far as I understand what they're doing. So we try to kind of keep separate from that.
Yeah. That would make
'cause
sense.
They do work in the defense industry, but I don't think they're actually doing anything defense related. They're just trying to master the instrument and get a lot of technology under their belt. But they're a great partner because they get the site for half the day. So basically that means like from 8 a.m. to usually 5 or 6 p.m. And they do their work, and the maintenance guy who works for them is paid by them. He's great. He keeps all these things greased and maintains everything, fixes things, and so he's keeping this thing really going well. There's another employee of SRI, and she's there. Her name is Ellen, and she does all the computer maintenance and installs and keeps all the computers going. And then there's another several people that are involved with site maintenance and managing the site. So it's a great deal for us because we don't have to pay anything. They pay all the electricity and they maintain everything, and we get it for a little bit more than half the day, or actually nighttime is when we get it. So so SRI has set it up to where you can come and take a tour during business hours from 9 to 3 every day, and you can...
Is that 7 days a week?
5 days a week.
5 to 8.
Yeah,
Monday through Friday. Okay.
If you come there Saturday and Sunday, the gates are closed.
Yeah.
But you can walk on and drive on, and you can take a little self-tour. There's a little kiosk there. You can read about things. You can come in and look at our really big, huge, fancy computer with all the blinking lights. If you want to arrange a tour, you can arrange a tour like we quite commonly have. Large buses of people come in and they arrange to have a tour, and I give a tour, or somebody else gives a tour.
Very nice.
Which doesn't take that long, maybe half an hour. And also, if I'm there, you can come in and bug me, and I'll show you around. So it's an easy site to visit.
That's wonderful, and I know that other person, Ellen.
Ellen.
And she's
okay.
local grown.
That's right. She's from Reading.
Ellen Clausine, wonderful artist.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
She shows me that.
Yes. In fact, I didn't know till recently when I was one of her art exhibits that she told me she was working up there, and I went, "Oh,
was this the recent one with the big balls?"
Yeah, the spheres.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has wonderful mosaic spheres.
Uh-huh.
I love that. So, if a person decides they want to come up and do a tour, is there a phone number they call? Do they go on the internet? How's that work out?
Okay, you can probably look up the phone number with Google, but the website for the site is www, and you have to do the www.
Yes.
.hcro.org.
So that's 8, the number 8?
No, HCRO, for Hat Creek Radio Observatory.
Okay.
.org.
.org.
Yeah.
So HCRO stands for Hat Creek Radio Observatory .org, because you are a nonprofit, which I want to be sure that we mention, because it's wonderful that you have SRI Corporation there and they're taking care of maintenance and a lot of that, but maybe there's a listener that's tuning in that goes, "Hey, I think this is a great idea and I would like to make a donation."
Right. So the SETI Institute has a site called SETI.org. It's SETI.org. And on there is an easy way to donate. They're a nonprofit. And so they have forms for you to fill out, and all tax deductible and everything.
Wonderful. So SETI stands for?
The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So it's becoming a common acronym now in the
Yes.
scientific community.
definitely. And I think more mainstream too. I think Contact and some of our sci-fi programs have helped
Right. It's quite a few.
expand that
Yeah.
awareness. So you are with the SETI Institute, so the phone number would be on there to make arrangements?
Yes.
Okay, great. Because I want to encourage our listeners, one, to see 42, what do you call them?
Dishes.
Dishes.
Receiving dishes.
Receiving dishes.
Mhm.
To see those, I mean, it's extraordinary imagery. Reminds me of Contact.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, why Hat Creek?
Okay, the reason for Hat Creek is they wanted some place to be within driving range of San Francisco, because that's where the SETI Institute is, and that's where UC Berkeley is, right? So they have kind of a scientific center there. But they needed to get away from the city. They'd like to make it next door,
Right.
but the problem is
Not realistic.
radio frequency interference.
Yeah.
All right, so what you want to do is get as far away as you can. So this site had already been operating since the early '60s because of this. If you go to the site, you'll know what I mean. It's surrounded by all sides by mountains, but the middle area is kind of like a crater. It's a large, flat area.
Mhm.
So that's what we can build these dishes on. And because it's kind of depressed and surrounded by mountains, that creates more of a buffer
Yeah.
for radio frequency interference. For instance, we can point our dishes towards Reading and see, all the radio signals and coming from here, but it's dampened quite a bit because of the mountains. So
And you're pointing up instead of towards Reading.
well, we can point anywhere. So
Mhm.
if we're tracking a star all night, the Earth rotates and all the stars rotate above us, appear to rotate above us, and we could basically track something and be looking for signals that are coming from over Reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on a I don't know if you call it an average night that you're doing that, because you go from after SRI uses the facility during the day and you work till they begin using it in the morning.
Right.
So what do you normally do? Are you pointing at specific things?
Okay, so that's a good topic. We discuss this all the time. There's so many ideas. We try not to flip-flop around, So what we've been doing is concentrating on planets that have been discovered by this mission called the Kepler mission. And the Kepler mission is this extremely successful mission by NASA, and they sent up this spacecraft called the Kepler, and it trails the Earth, I believe, by like 1 million miles. But it's been staring at this one small section of our galaxy, and it's a 10 degree. If we look up into the sky, it appears to be a 10 degree by 10 degree area in the sky. They have this spacecraft has been extremely still. It's had all these gyros, staring at this spot with these cameras. So these cameras have pixels in the camera, and so each one of these stars has a pixel in the camera, and they can measure the brightness of the star and how it deviates over time. A lot of the flicker we see from stars here on Earth is because of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
But when you get up there, they don't flicker quite so much. But these flicker, they're able to look at these flickering. And why are they? I don't want to say flickering, but they dip. Their brightness dips.
Mhm.
Why are they dipping? Well, they've discovered that if they analyze the light intensity, they can detect that there is actually a planet that has gone in front of that star and the Kepler cameras. So they can detect these planets that are rotating around these stars. They've identified what they believe is over 3,000 of these planets, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think 400 or 500 of those they're 100% sure there's planets, and they've been looking at the data, analyzing it more and more, and they're able to get in finer grained detail of how big these planets are, how far they are from these stars. So that's 400 or 500 that we know are planets there. But a lot of those planets are just planets like Jupiter. They're too huge to actually have life.
Why do you say that?
Well, life as we know it, intelligent life, because we're thinking Jupiter, well, first of all, Jupiter is mostly gas, right?
Yep.
And it has a lot of gravity. So what they're actually looking for, and they're getting closer to finding this, is finding a planet which they call in the Goldilocks zone. That's the actual term. So Goldilocks was had to just right. So they're looking for a planet that's around a sun that's not too big, not too small.
It's just
And
right.
it's cycle year on cycle. It's not too short, not too long. It's not too close, it's not too far away, that kind of thing. So they're looking for one that's right in the Goldilocks zone that could be Earth-like and maybe harbor life. So far, they haven't found the exact match for Earth, but give it a couple decades, maybe they'll find something. So anyway, we have this catalog of all these stars and planets discovered by the Kepler mission. So that is one of the things we look at. So we have a catalog, and our software actually dips into the database and sees what's up at the moment. Because these things aren't up all the time because the Earth rotates.
Rotates, yeah.
So we pick from that. But the Kepler mission, the Kepler section of the sky where it's been staring at is only up for 4 or 5 hours before it rotates out. And sometimes during the night it's not even up. It's only visible during the day, only up there during the day.
Mm-hmm.
So we're concentrating on another set of stars, and we've gone through M dwarf stars. M dwarf stars are the kind of star, sort of like ours, that we think could harbor a planet, that could harbor life. So these are stars that aren't too big, aren't too small, aren't too bright, aren't too old, etc.
Well, it kind of makes sense because, there'd be a greater likelihood of life if it is duplicate of what we have.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we've got a list of the 20,000 closest of those. And that's what we're doing every night, is where the system goes into either the Kepler catalog or these 20,000 closest dwarf stars, and whatever's applicable, and stares at them all night.
So let's imagine that it picked up some sort of signal that indicated that there is a sound coming that you are interested in tracking. How do you know that? Are you seeing something? You're not hearing it. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
How do you know?
Okay,
How are you alerted?
So what we do is, the way it works is, our system has this capability called beamforming, which allows us to look at 3 different things in the sky at once. So all of the dishes are honed in at the same area in the sky, but electronically we take the signals and we actually only look at 3 distinct dots. So we have these 3 places in the sky we're looking for signals, so that we commonly gather the data for a minute and a half, stop the observing, and then analyze the data, which takes roughly another minute and a half. And then we do another minute and a half of data gathering.
And this is all done by artificial intelligence?
This not artificial intelligence, but quite a nice program we've written over the past decade.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's automatic. So all I have to do is set it up at night with the correct parameters, make sure it all starts up. Sometimes it doesn't start up because dishes hang, dishes break down or whatever. Once everything's started up, I can usually go to bed. And it's only disturbed by if a dish actually breaks. Occasionally they do, and then like the motor gives out or something, or there's bad weather, bad winds. Other than that, it just keeps going all night long. So what it does basically in the computer programs is it does kind of what we would do visually. Is it creates basically a map of the radio frequency data that looks mostly like static, like you'd see on a television screen. So what this computer program is trying to do is look through this and find things that are not static. For instance, shapes, blips, lines, that kind of thing. Those kind of things are actual signals. Now we have techniques where we comb through and try to identify the ones that are radio frequency interference, which is 90.99999% of them. Okay.
What you get.
Occasionally, one actually comes through, and we see a signal. So the beauty of our system is, we say, hey, this system says, hey, it saw a signal. Go back, and it goes back and looks at the area again and sees if it sees the signal. Weeds out all the RFI, radio frequency interference again. If that same thing pops up, it does a technique called looking off, or it looks a little bit off, and does the same analysis. And if it sees the signal when it's not even looking at that star, we know it's radio frequency interference from somewhere, maybe a satellite or a piece of equipment that's acting goofy on site, that kind of thing. So there's this on-off thing.
Yeah.
And if it passes this test all the way to the 5th on, and it actually still sees the signal, we get an email. It says, hey, there's something that happened here. You need to go look. So that's what happens. So if it's during the day, or I see it at nighttime, I'm not sleeping, I'll go back. I say, hey, and I'll train the system. We'll go back and look at that again. Otherwise, we have to wait till the next day to look at it. So we've had that happen like 3 or 4 times. Earlier this year, it happened.
3 or 4 times a year, or
no, 3 or 4 times since I've been working there.
which is how long?
It's 8 years now.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Did you get excited? I bet you did.
But we go back and we look and say, oh, it's something. I remember one time it was, oh, wait a minute, we actually had a software setting incorrect, and it was reporting incorrectly. And that was one thing. We had one earlier this year, and I'm actually going back and looking at the data from the signal reports and looking at all this static and everything. I could see that it was probably an old satellite up there, just and its frequency was wandering around erratically like an old piece of equipment. But I went back and I diligently looked over the last 5 days, looked, and never did see it again.
So you're trained to be able to see something that's not static.
Right, that's basically what it's. Yeah, something not static, and something that has what I mentioned earlier, that Doppler shift.
Yes.
In it.
That makes sense.
And still, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of satellites that are up there moving. Right, there's a lot of satellites, and they're broadcasting in these frequency ranges, and we'll see a nice signal. It looks like the one we're looking for, but usually, since those are moving, they'll pass through our field of view.
Yeah.
We see them once or twice, not 5 times,
Yeah.
and they go away.
It's fascinating. I am here in conversation with John Richards. He is the senior software engineer for the SETI Institute and is on site at Hat Creek Radio Observatory. And one of the things he shared earlier in our program, if you're just tuning in, is that you can take a tour of the facility up there. It's open Monday through Friday, 9 to 3 o'clock. They have a website. It's SETI.org. That's SETI.org. Stands for
Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence.
And also, you can look at the Hat Creek Radio Observatory website, and that is
www.hcro.org.
Stands for the Hat Creek Radio Observatory.org.
I also have another site.
Yeah?
You can find it by going to SETI.org, but I have this website I developed kind of on my own. It's kind of taken off. It's called SETI Quest. It's SETIQUEST.info. And if you go to that site, it actually, while we're observing, it shows you a map of the stars, and it actually circles each one of the stars we're looking. We're looking at 3 stars at once. It shows you what frequency we're looking at and kind of the progress. I have a little window down there where I type in comments like, observing screwed up tonight, or observing's going well, or winds are too high, or computer broke, that kind of thing. And it has my Twitter feed also on the site. So if you go to SETIQuest.info at nighttime, during the day, it's got stuff during the day, but the nighttime really jumps alive and shows you live what we're looking at.
Because that's what you're doing is at night.
Yeah, mostly at night, yeah.
So it is SETI,
Quest.
SETIQUEST?
Yes.
Okay.
.info.
.info.
And if you go to SETI.org
Tune
on the
in.
main page, you can see a
A
place
link.
to link to it. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah.
Earlier, too, in our first segment, we were talking about Jill Tarter.
Mm-hmm.
She is the person that kind of put together the SETI Institute. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And she's still involved?
Oh, yes. So when I first started there in 2008, she was, I guess, technically my boss.
Uh-huh.
But she has since retired. But the SETI Institute is kind of a strange organization in that when people retire, they don't go away. They want to keep
It's her
doing it
passion.
because of their passion,
Yeah.
right? So she is not in. She still has an office. She's not in there quite so much, but she actually works as what I consider full time. She does a lot of evangelism relating to SETI. Right? She goes all over the world giving these inspirational talks relating to the SETI, the quest, what would happen if we find extraterrestrial intelligence beamed at us, that kind of thing. So more of a philosophy side,
Mm-hmm.
but she's also very hep to the scientific side and into the scientific community. So she's got her feet, in both oceans there.
And she had a personal relation with Carl Sagan.
Okay, so I was not involved in that. So what I know about is third-hand knowledge. But,
Yeah.
when there were a lot more engineers working there on this project when I started in 2008. They were telling me that when they were going to film the Contact movie, the movie studio sent these people there to watch them for a couple days, and they were watching all the engineers, and they wanted to know, like, what kind of coffee cups do you have? How many pencils do you have? What kind of pads of paper do you have? What do your computer monitors look like?
Interesting.
And so they wanted to get as realistic as they could. But yeah, so the protagonist in the movie, Jodie Foster played her, was from the book, and the book from Carl Sagan wrote. He used Jill Tarter as kind of a I don't know what you call it, the model.
Yeah.
That a person he kind of wrote his story about.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So in the movie, one of the big things when people think back out of the movie, and if there's anybody out there who hasn't seen the movie, it's a really good movie.
Yes.
But she's sitting there, Jodie Foster's sitting there, and in the background's these huge dishes, and she's got headphones on. Well, that's not done. Like I explained earlier, we don't do the headphones, but they do that in the movies because you just don't want to have. It's boring to see computers sitting there working. So you think listening for signals. That's the way it was in the movie.
Yeah. Actually, when you started talking, that's what I expected because of the movie.
Right.
That you had headphones and you were listening.
Right.
But you're listening differently.
Yeah. Right.
You're tracking.
Yeah. So I get this question quite often. People say, "Isn't your job kind of boring then?" Because they expected me to be sitting there listening to these exciting signals with headphones all day long. That's not the way it goes.
It would be life-altering if you picked up something, wouldn't it?
Right. Yeah. Funding would probably increase, I assume. There's this thing called the SETI protocol, which is what happens if in the middle of the night, that I see a signal. I think it's definitely something. Okay. So first of all, I'm not supposed to tell anybody in the media,
Right.
or anybody else. I'm supposed to tell our team, and the team will descend and we'll look at. Well, first of all, I'm supposed to look for it again, second and third time, and if it actually pans out, or even if it doesn't pan out, I'm supposed to tell our team, and we go through all the data, and then, only then, if we all agree, then we contact the other radio astronomy places in the world, and they look for it.
To see if they can pick it up.
Right. So it's not like I'll see it one day and next it'll be in the newspaper.
Yeah.
It'll be a process.
That's fascinating. I think it's very interesting. And, I'm definitely going to go up and take a tour of the observatory. That would be fascinating.
Great.
And I'm also going to look at the website. If people, just as we mentioned, because we're out of time for our program, the website for the SETI is?
SETI.org.
And that's
SETI.org.
And they can take a look at what you're observing and where you're looking by going to the link that's on that website.
Yes.
And it's basically live of what you're doing at nighttime.
Right.
Not during the daytime, nighttime.
Yeah. During the week ends, usually during the day, but mostly at night in the weekdays.
I want to encourage our listeners to get on the website, take a look. If this is something you're intrigued in, would like to support, they welcome donations for their
Yes.
work. Keep the donations coming. And I want to encourage you to go take a tour. And if you haven't seen the movie Contact, or if it's been a while since you've seen the movie Contact, check it out, because I know for me, I'm definitely going to take it. So take a look at it. Thank you, John, for being here.
You're welcome.
John Richards, he is a senior software engineer for SETI Institute at the Hat Creek Radio Observatory. Get involved, explore not only our beautiful North State region, but the stars.
That's right.
I want to thank our listeners, remind you, make this day and every day a day to enjoy exceptional living. I want to thank you for joining us.